See you again.
All right. So, hi, audience participant. Nice to see you again today in short course series 3, still with our distinguished tutor, Dr. Ibrar. And last session, we have discussed a lot about theory guiding the research and methods in digital literacy. And yeah, I guess last time Dr. Ibrar has explained very clearly, defining very clearly about the concept of digital literacy itself. And what I can understand is that literacy involves not only user technical skills, but also like experience within specific context, and it must uh, passes through a complex processes of learning, practicing, and also self-development. Yeah, and last time we've also discussed about some methods in researching digital literacy, such as ethnography, focused interview, participatory methods, and also survey. And yeah, I bet all participants have been waiting for another fruitful discussion today with our tutor, Dr. Ibrar, and I guess it will be about language online. Yeah, well, without further ado, let's invite Dr. Ibrar.
Hi everyone. Selamat pagi and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to you all. I hope you are very good.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I really enjoyed the other day. It was very tight. I had to distill a lot of content into one session, and I will do something similar this time around. Maybe not as intense because theory is sometimes something you have to explain and ponder over and talk about. So I'm really pleased that you've contributed to many of you actually, to the Google group. And I've been looking at that. And it's really good. Thank you for that. So I'll just share my screen now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, clearly.
Yes.
So one of the things I noticed when I looked at your technobiographies or the responses to the technobiographic questions, I noticed that and this happens every time I do this. People have very different and very unique and very distinct stories in their personal life around literacy, writing, technology, and language and communities. And so it's always interesting. It's something you could do at the beginning of a course, actually, is to ask these kinds of questions and get people to respond. And then that gives you a kind of an individual account of different people's personal history with technology. Of course, one shouldn't solicit anything negative or hurtful in that kind of interview or discussion. Sometimes that can emerge, unintentionally. So one should always be very careful of that. And one of the things I noticed was the multiple languages that people draw from in their backgrounds. I mean, Indonesia is very diverse, both ethnically, linguistically as well. I mean, it's remarkably diverse, and so that diversity is sometimes not present in the public sphere, in the public space, in the shared space, but it's very, very present in the digital spaces where people in their individual communities will, in their networks and with their family members and friends, will communicate in a very integrated way, in the sense that language won't be separated out into different types. Rather, people's languaging, if I can use it like that, will be carried out as if it were an integrated system. Everybody's different linguistic repertoire is one system, according to some theorists, and those are the theories that I will draw from when just talking about language online. So when people communicate, they won't respect the boundaries of language. Sometimes they do, but in many cases they don't. In most cases, arguably, they don't. They just move from one. They just move from one mode to another, and mix modes and mix codes and send their messages. And so that's a really interesting thing to see online. So we'll be looking at some of that. We'll also be looking at communities online as well. We'll be turning back to the Google group activities, and you can contribute to them further in the interim periods of this lesson. So as I said, technobiographies tell you about people's history of use with technology and how multilingualism actually works online, how it emerges, what it looks like, and what that can tell us, what their multilingual behavior can tell us about not just the technology, but about language itself. Okay. And how that has evolved over the course of their lives. So it's important to get a bit of history when we start talking about the internet. So I think, and language. So I'm going to sort of start with that and then build up to the current situation. So the internet was first developed in English and for English. There wasn't really much of a consideration of other languages, and it wasn't really the primary concern of the inventors of this technology. And a major debate within the literature of multilingualism in the 1990s was whether the spread of the internet would bring about relations between English and other languages. And there was a debate that the spread of the internet would make English dominate. It would be a form of colonialism, sort of techno-linguistic colonialism. And others said, no, it will be a form of flattening things out and giving everybody the chance to communicate in their own language. So there was this debate. About English ruling the internet or the internet giving opportunities for other languages to emerge. And to some extent, the internet has done both of these things at the same time. It has created the domination, it has facilitated and the domination of English, but it has also allowed other languages to flourish. I mean, take a minority but indigenous language where I am, Irish and Ulster Scotch, are two very small minority languages, but indigenous languages here in the island of Ireland. And these languages flourish in online spaces. So many Facebook groups about Irish and Gaelic and Ulster Scots and so people's interest in minority languages has developed because of communities online of those minority languages. So the internet has done both of these. Paradoxically, it has facilitated the domination of English, and it has allowed minority tongues to have more space and exposure for those people who want to practice those minority languages. So the academic response to this debate was twofold. So as I say, it was to basically try and understand how other languages are flourishing within the internet, like minority languages, and also how the internet was allowing English to dominate. So the primary aim of this session is basically to understand language practice in the day-to-day digital activities of people, including our own. So we'll have a look at those. So the internet was a predominantly English medium, both in terms of users and in terms of content, especially in the 1990s. And that's why if you look on Google Scholar, you'll see a lot of the research around computer-mediated communication was focused on English. But predictions about how English would dominate became challenged by people like David Crystal and various other writers in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. And there are interesting surveys about how different languages were developing on the internet. But look at these quotes. These are from the 1990s. Just have a quick read of them. And I'll just open it. I'll just keep my eye on the chat. If any of you have any comments about these quotes, let me know. Just share your views about them. Have some comments. Right. If you want in the chat, you can share your opinion on these quotations. And what they tell you, what you think these quotations tell you. Any response to those? Yeah. Well, the quotations are basically centered around English. They're from the 1990s, and they're problematizing the connection between English and the technology. And they are arguing that the internet is this technology which is facilitating the domination of English. Yeah. Although we have moved on since this debate, actually. These are old, out of dated quotes, if you like. And the reason is because since the 1990s, access to the internet has become more affordable, which has given rise to the growth of mass communications across geographical borders. So people are actually speaking multiple languages on the internet, not just English. And they're using English to create other codes of other languages, like Cantonese, for example, as we will look at, can be written in Chinese script, but it can also be written in Romanized script. And before the internet technologies facilitated Chinese characters, many people in the Cantonese speaking diaspora around the world, or it's a global community of some 40 million people, I think, would communicate through computer mediated communication, writing in Cantonese in Roman script. And Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesian, I think before it was Roman script, it may have been something else. I'm sure it was. I read an article about it many years ago, and I can't remember. So various surveys, including Internet World Stats, and you can check the website out. They're pretty interesting. Have shown that languages other than English now proliferate. Why is this? Well, migration, appropriation, as people appropriate technologies and practices of digital literacy for their own community work. I mean, look at examples of how you are, like other people, how you will draw from multiple language codes and in how you communicate. We will return to this later. Now, one thing about these surveys, these large-scale quantitative surveys of linguistic diversity, sometimes they can be quite misleading. Which language do you use on the internet? And you tick it, and it's a very sort of simplistic methodology sometimes, because they don't take account of the diversity of language practice in individual users' activities. Okay, people don't use one language at a time on the internet. Okay, especially in their informal chats. And just because you're talking to people in Indonesia doesn't mean they're going to be using Indonesian. Just because you're talking to people in England or Britain doesn't mean that they're going to be using English. So country-based statistics on language used on the internet, it's a little bit simplistic. They don't take account of individual user practice, which is what a social practice approach to digital literacy focuses on, which is what we talked about in the last lesson. In 2011, the United Nations declared that having access to the internet is a basic human right. When in fact, by the end of 2014, less than half of the world's population were online. While quantitative surveys, as I said earlier, suggest that smaller languages have been disadvantaged in the internet, those languages may well be underrepresented due to the limitations of the survey methodologies, which don't take account of how multiple codes get used at the same time. Those figures that they use are only, I'll show you some of those figures in a second. They're only indicative of what happens to the public web content, you know, like on web page, like news and stuff like that. So in those web pages, languages are distinctly separated: English, Indonesian, Chinese, Russian. And questionnaires, people sort of like market surveys and reports, they're not really comprehensive investigations of individual linguistic diversity, how people draw on multiple resources in authentic acts of communication. And you can't really measure by geographic location either, but nevertheless, there are some interesting stats around this. Statistics like these can be useful and interesting, but only up to a point. They don't tell you, as I said earlier, the complexity of individual practices I asked you to complete that Padlet earlier, and some of you have contributed to it. And I'm just checking if anybody else has, so that I can add your Indonesian examples to it. But people mix languages very, very readily. So statistics from this table, which is slightly outdated now, actually, show the large proportion of non-English language speakers on the web, which Chinese, Spanish, and Arabic being the larger ones after English. In response to the growing diversity of users and their language resources, some researchers have turned their attention to non-English interaction on the internet and seeing how that actually emerges. The first comprehensive edited volume was in 2000 on multilingualism on the internet was the Multilingual Internet in 2007 by Dannett and Herring. It's 18 chapters and it's very interesting. It's very good. I mean, it's 2007, so it's a little bit old now, but I still recommend it if you can get it. But make sure you flag up the areas that need updating. It's a good sort of methodological bit of grounding as well. One of the main reasons why linguists should pay attention to multilingualism on the internet is that, as David Crystal argues, the internet is a home for all languages. It's a huge database of freely and publicly available multilingual text. And if you can research people's individual interactions, that's even better, as we will look at shortly, actually. So what I said earlier about languages and how people use them on the internet. Does anybody here have any experience with Cantonese and Chinese? Anyone? No?
No.
So up to 100 people? Somebody has to have. Somebody has to have. Okay, so what we see here, do you see two languages here? On the face of it, most people will say, I see two languages.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Chinese or Cantonese?
Because for me, these types of writing, probably yeah, to some Indonesian, I don't know whether it is Chinese or Korean, because they.
Okay, I'm telling you it's Chinese.
Yeah. The style is quite similar, I guess, to some of us. Probably they just don't know.
Yeah. If only life was so easy that you could just say it's two languages. But really, there are not two languages here. There are multiple codes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So and multiple codes, and in many interactions you will have multiple modes and codes. So if you imagine a palette, you know, a palette, like an artist will have a palette with lots of colors on. Okay,
Yeah.
that's your language repertoire. You've got in there Indonesian, English, bit of this, bit of that, and then you have the modes, like the colors. I mean, the pictures, the gifs, the memes, you know, and that goes as well. And so it's all one. So when we speak, we do not say I'm using English, I'm using this, I'm using that. We use our full repertoire. Okay, we use a full palette of colors. So this person here is using actually what we see here is, so Carmen Lee in her work in 2007, and this is drawn from that work, she identified several major codes available to her in her research. So in this extract, we have standard English. Can you see it? London, Freiburg, only, muffin, euro. Standard English, code 1. Then we have standard written Chinese. You got that there, right? You can see it. Then we have Cantonese in characters. Cantonese in characters, right? Then we have Romanized Cantonese, right? Can you see the O in number 2?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
No, the O is actually O, which means I. You know Chinese, you know that O means I. But the character for O, it's a bit of a weird one. So why go through a lot of trouble and just use the English O, which sounds exactly like O, right? Put that in. So that's Romanized Cantonese. Then we have morpheme by morpheme literal translation. Look at the D, past tense. I was hoping somebody would know Chinese and they could explain it to me. But the D is a morpheme. You know the morpheme? Like, you know, the D for past tense in many of regular verbs will be D for past tense. And the M is also a morpheme. And so so she recognized here 5 major codes. But I would like to, in this particular interaction, 5 codes. So when people are using the internet to communicate, especially informally, they're not using languages, they're using codes, and they're mixing them up, like you know. And I would argue, and some others argue, that it's not just 5 codes. Actually, we use modes, GIFs. I've had entire conversations in GIFs. I'm ashamed to say it, but it's just they're so clever, these GIFs now, you know. You can get them to express practically any kind of emotion, you know. And so people will use pictures and GIFs and stickers as well as the modes. So when we look at this as a repertoire rather than as a language, people call this translanguaging. Okay, now trans means to move across, like transport, transnational, you know, transsexual, you know, I mean, that's moving across, right? So not to stay in one place, not to respect the boundary, okay? And people are translingual on the internet, okay? I am, certainly. Informally, I'm very translingual. Formally, I'm an essentialist. But in learning, I'm an essentialist. But in practice, I'm a translingual. And most people are. So this is the theory of translanguaging. Know it if you want to get into this line of research. Now, think about, now, what is evident here is that the web offers a space for people to write in minority languages like Cantonese or in varieties of language that do not have any standard writing system, but have developed a new rich lease of life. You have been given a new lease of life and a new rich existence online. Think there's another language, Assyrian, which is spoken by a small minority of people in the Middle East. It's practically died, the language, but in online spaces, there's been a revival of the language. A Romanized form of colloquial Egyptian Arabic has developed online. And of course, the Southern Chinese, Hong Kong, and the other Cantonese-speaking diaspora have maintained practice of Cantonese in a very creative and interesting way. To the extent that I would like to learn Cantonese now. So think about your own practices. Think about. Oops. Where do I go back? Think about your own practices with chat. I'm just going to try and go back. There we go. Think about how you do this. Okay? And how do you make the decision to move from one mode to the next or one code to the next? What ecological factors? Please write them in the chat. Okay, Diane, you said when I want to emphasize emotion that I want to show my interlocutors. Interesting. So emotion, that's one factor. We all switch codes. We all switch modes. We are mostly, entirely, all of us, translingual. Now, my question to you, which I will spend a few minutes on in the chat, tell me what factors go into you considering which code to adopt. And while you are there, have a look at this, but I will come back to this. I asked you to, I only got 2 responses from you. Yeah, but what do you mean communicativeness? You're going to have to be specific. Right? So I have asked people for examples and they are in the link. Can you see that link?
Yes.
More practical, yes, UD. Sometimes technological constraints. Let's write them down. Techno. Speed. What else? Expressiveness. Yes. At the same time, we said it at the same time, Diane and myself. Okay, what about user familiarity? Okay. Also exclusion. You don't want some people to understand what you're saying. Remember, parents watching, talk to you later, right? So you don't want people to, you want to focus on, you want to say something private. Humor is you know, we can call this ludic self-construction. You know, humor is often one. Politeness, of course, and also, you know, sometimes if you look at these chats, examples, many examples here of many languages, I noticed that when people are talking about their assignments, they will use the word assignment. We'll use formal words that are academic in English and the rest in the other language. Okay, so sometimes the words that stay in one language, they carry a certain kind of connection to something that people don't want to translate. Okay, and so there are many ecological. We can call these ecological factors which go into considering which code to adopt. Okay, contextualization cues. If you're into linguistics, you'll know what those are. Does anyone know what contextualization cues are? Okay. Contextualization cues are when you use cues or signals within the conversation that signal the context. And not everybody understands them because it's kind of like shared knowledge. So sometimes, so if I'm, you know, if I'm speaking in Indonesian, let's say, I mean, I don't speak Indonesian, but if I were to, and I talked about something specific, like, you know, a cultural aspect, like a song or something. If I didn't know what that was, I would have trouble engaging in that conversation because even though I know the language, I don't know that the historical importance of that song. So that's like a contextualization cue. Sometimes people use contextualization cues in the form of punctuation. They put multiple exclamation marks, multiple question marks, which shows that I'm I really want to know this, but it's like I want to know now, like, oh, why, like many question marks, and things like that. And some people use exclamation mark and question mark together, and these are contextualization cues that may mean different things in different contexts, and you know what you know when a contextualization cue works, and you know when it doesn't work, because then there's a misunderstanding. So sometimes it's best to learn about things through when they don't work. So translanguaging, if you're interested in this kind of thing, this is a very useful heuristic. Heuristic. Sorry, does someone have a question?
Dibilang Sam suruh ke sini, Sam.
And a heuristic is a way of understanding, examining, and interpreting something. A way of examining, understanding, and interpreting something. Okay. The internet has made the world a complex web of villages, towns, and neighborhoods, connected by material and symbolic ties in often unpredictable ways. And this complexity needs to be examined because it occurs linguistically as well. In order to do this, we need to think about language as located in and distributed across the global and local networks. The networks are trans-contextual, and they move and they flow, and so are the language practices that we use. They are trans-contextual, and this is a challenge for linguists to try to understand. Translanguaging is about the mixing of codes and modes as occurring through one repertoire. Unlike previous studies and previous theories, which have conceptualized a dichotomy of first language and second language and third language, or separate languages. And this is a multilingualism perspective. A translanguaging perspective says, no, there is just one repertoire, and in practice, you draw from the one repertoire. And the one repertoire consists of all your language knowledge, regardless of the boundary between one language and the other. And they argue that how most of the world uses language is about one repertoire. And that's why I call this section languaging. We draw from multiple codes and multiple modes at the same time. So if you just click on that link, because that link, can you click it, or can you go to the, shall I just move that thing? I'll put the link in, hold on. So you can read more about translanguaging there, and it's an okay explanation. It's pretty accessible. And this particular link has Constant Young's explanation of translanguaging, if you want to listen to it, if you want to watch it, which also connects, and they also connect it to translanguaging pedagogy. So using the repertoire of the learner as part of the language learning process. Okay. So you can have a look at that in the interim period. Although I have actually sent you this link already in the Google. And so that's why translanguaging is defined as occurring as an integrated system of language rather than as separate entities. You don't switch one language to the next. You just draw on all your resources at the same time. Okay. It sees language as a property of communication, as a property of the community. The language resources that are relevant to a community are those that are shared by the people in that community. And they seldom confine themselves to one language. It's why translanguaging is linked to the notion of a community, which we will see later. And if we adopt a maximalist approach to translanguaging, then this involves even gesture and hand movements and physical movements as part of the repertoire. Okay, so it's not just linguistic, it is gestural, multimodal. And that's what trans means. It means to move across. So if we are taking a true repertoire oriented approach to languaging, then we also have to look at gesture, okay? And these things, these hand movements, these facial expressions, they're also part of the languaging process, okay? And if anything, the internet has made this more apparent in ways that were always existed, but were difficult to capture empirically for research. So I will let you read the content of that slide. There's a lot of detail there because it's theory again. So I want to get it right. So do you have any questions on this?
No, so translanguaging is not only about changing the codes, but also the modes of the way we communicate using language, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because so far, especially most of my students just assume translate languaging just like code switch or code mix, something like that.
Yeah, that's one way of talking about it, and that's a theory that has some, popularity. A translanguaging approach doesn't see them as separate codes or modes. It sees them as one system, and you draw from everything in that system. So it's just a different way of thinking about it. If you look at, I will show you a paper that shows you the differences between the two. Okay, it's about. Hold on. Okay, it's in the slide. Rindu, read the slide. It's in there. I've already explained it. I'm just trying to find another slide where I explained it. Hold on. Okay, so some people have talked about plurilingualism. Okay, it's a term that comes up, especially in the Council of Europe documentation. And there's a definition of it there, which I took from Kanagaraja's paper on this. So to tell you sort of briefly, the plurilingualism is also an interesting concept which focuses on the development of linguistic tolerance. Plurilingualism is about languages as separate entities, and you just make you conceptualize them as separate, and a person becomes fluent in one language and then fluent in another language. Okay, they study one and then they study another, and they become multilingual. Whereas translanguaging is more about how bilingualism operates in the life of the bilingual person. It doesn't see them as separate languages. It just sees them as one system. Okay, even with our bodies and our gestures and our modes. So there isn't practically there is no difference between these two approaches. The difference is how you think about them. Okay, That's the only difference. If you want to know more about plurilingualism and code mixing and translanguaging, you see the paper by Garcia and Ortega. Okay, which is an interesting paper talking about the difference between plurilingualism. The difference arguably is ideological. Okay, that languages are separate. Languages are separate things. Okay, so when you go to an internet website, when you go to Google, and you go to a website in Indonesian, it asks you if you want to translate it into English. Okay, so then you translate it into English. And so the ideology of Google is that languages are distinctly separate, either one or either the other, with very little mix between the two. All right, that's a plurilingualism ideology. That is a multilingualism ideology. But a translingual ideology would be one where it's all mixed together, even at the morphological level. And websites don't tend to do that. Journalists and publishers don't tend to do that. But people do that. People do it like that. Individuals do it like that. And so the difference is one of how you conceptualize how people language. Okay, Rindu, that is the difference. The difference is one of how you conceptualize this. So I asked you to visit the Padlet, and I asked you also to share your views or your responses rather to it. And let's have a look. And I asked you also to upload, if you can, some extracts of your chat. I will obviously approve them before I put them in, nothing private, please. And I asked you to also answer these questions. So I asked you to, how are the participants in the examples of mobile interaction, how they draw from different linguistic resources, which is the dominant language, when is each language used? You can just take 2 or 3 of the ones that you really like from that set of examples. Is there impression management taking place? What is impression management? Anyone know? Anyone want to write in the chat? Or shall we just have, can we have breakout rooms? Does that work? Maybe they don't want to talk because I'm talking. So maybe if we have breakout rooms, that may work. Impression management is about how you present yourself online. You also must answer what multilinguals must take into consideration when using multiple codes and modes in online chat. The benefits of using such extracts in the language classroom. Can you list any platforms that are multilingual? So these are the questions that I answer, and I'd like you to now turn to the Google page on this and answer those questions. Remember the Padlet on translanguaging? Okay. Or you could do it in the chat. Actually, let's do it in the chat. So I want you to answer these questions in the chat, please. Okay, let me just. Do you mind? Can we have breakout rooms? Is that okay? Or is that?
Okay for having a breakup room. Mbak Dina bisa bagi kelompok. We can discuss this in group, maybe.
Yeah, maybe we can discuss the answer to these questions in groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I need to confirm Budina first whether we have a breakup room or not, because I don't really know about how it's.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Okay. So how many?
Well, we can have how many people do we have? 130. That's a lot. Okay, let's have
160?
we can have like 6 in each group.
6 in each group. All right.
And they, can you take a picture of this slide, because I want you to when you go to the breakout room, you will lose this presentation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I've got the picture already of the
And then
activity.
everybody does that, and then you can just answer these questions while you're looking at the Padlet. Okay.
Okay.
So I want you to look at the Padlet, which has all the examples, and then remind yourself of your practices, and then answer these questions.
All right.
Sudah semua kelompoknya.
How many then?
6 groups.
6.
6 in each group.
Oh, 6 in each group.
Oh,
Yeah.
6
So if you have like let's make it 12 groups.
Oh, 12 groups.
All right.
Well, that would be a bit more, but it doesn't matter.
That'd be 20 groups.
Okay, 20 groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't join, but everybody else should.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rosalania. I appreciate it.
All right. So everyone, please move to your rooms and then have a discussion on the activities on translanguaging practices online, and discuss some questions there, please.
Interesting responses in the chat in the Google group.
Kok? Aduh. Belum sempat diskusi, Mbak. Panitianya siapa ya? Mbak Dina ya?
Okay, so sorry. So I will just recreate the breakout rooms.
Oke, dan tolong share screen-nya juga diaktifkan ya, Mbak ya?
Share screen-nya.
Tiap grup.
Okay.
We haven't discussed yet, Prof.
Oh.
Since the break room is very short in the short time. I think we need time more.
Okay, fine, that's fine. Yeah, I just want you to look at the Padlet and address those questions.
Yeah.
And the Padlet examples as to help you. So we can bring everybody in at about 9 o'clock. Is that okay?
Okay, 5 more minutes, you mean?
Everything okay, Dina?
I have problem in joining the breakout room. I was sent to room 19, but there was nobody.
Buddy?
Oh, no.
Yeah, but according to Nugget, there is five participants, and we're still working on it. Yeah.
Okay.
But they are not joining.
They're not talking.
Oh, they're not talking.
Well, this is the thing. You can never really control it, but
Yeah,
it's
correct.
not important to engage with the material and the reading.
Yeah,
That's the way learning is done. I mean,
yeah. Breakout room.
sambil bacain salawat.
okay. Should we bring everyone in?
Right, so 60 seconds and
Break
breakout.
room itu bukan restroom, kasih tahu.
Bu Rosma, I guess the students have problem in joining the breakout room. I guess, yeah. Rindu?
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
All
So
of them.
I don't know, because probably the students missed pressed the wrong buttons. For example, they want to leave the breakout room, but they, instead of joining the breakout room, they press leave the meeting. Because as you can see, a minute ago, the participants were only 50, yeah?
Can they come back in? It's just easy
Yeah.
to just click the link and come back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have no friends in the group. So
Yeah, that's the
but then
problem
all of
also with me. Yeah, Bu Dian. When I joined 19, there was nobody. I was the only one in the group.
yes, it was the same problem then.
But I see
So
130 participants that I just divided into 20, right? That would be around 5 to 6 participants in each room.
So you joined a group, but nobody spoke. Is that
no,
Nobody. There's nobody.
nobody's there.
Nobody there.
Only
Nobody's
one of,
there.
yeah.
So I guess they didn't press the
Yeah,
join breakout room. They didn't press the options, I guess.
so
All right. I thought they did this with the other classes. Breakout rooms is very common in Zoom now. I mean,
yeah.
everybody
It's very common. I know it.
did it in other
So how about
universities.
you, Rindu? Can I ask the students, Rindu, what did you do just now? Did you join the breakout room?
Yes, I did, but we had a little bit of chat and we tried to guess what the real meaning of the questions. And if may I have a chance to talk, we talk a bit about the answer of possible answers of the questions. For example, number one, how the participants and examples of mobile interaction draw from different linguistic resources, which is dominant language. I think it would be depends on this participants themselves whether they are beginner learners or more advanced learners like us. For example, I sent my translanguaging example on Padlets that Dr. Ibrar sent to us. And I think because we are, my friends and I are an intermediate English learners, so English would be so much dominant. And when is each language used? It also depends. Depends on the mood, I think. So if we want to use English, so we can use it immediately. And if we do not want to use it, then we shift the language into our first language. If there is impression management taking place, based on my self experience, yes, I think I have sort of self-control to impress myself, to perceive myself, to what ideas that I want to share with my interlocutors, my friends, and others. And for the last question, for example, can you list any online platforms that are multilingual? Yeah, there are many platforms that are multilinguals actually, but with myself, I usually use WhatsApp and YouTube and Facebook. Other than that, that I know, but maybe for number 3, and then the benefits of using such chat extract that we had no time to discuss, but those answers are based on my self-experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Rindu. So
Can I
everybody
share-
else here, right? Is everybody else here?
Can I share mine?
Absolutely, yes, please. I'm just worried about the other, where are 40 people, where they've gone.
Yes.
30
Can I share my screen, please, Mbak Dina? Because I
Okay, yeah.
able.
Wait for a second.
Thank you, Mbak. I haven't answered all this question, but I want to discuss with you and show you the screen capture of my group WA. Okay, and wait, this is your. Okay.
Can you do the share? Can you
Wait.
share the screen right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this is my. I want to share to discuss with you in this group. This is the question, and this is the screenshot of my WhatsApp group. Okay, This actually, if you if you see, there's actually two languages here. Bahasa Indonesia in here, and this one is Bahasa Minang. Minang is a part of West Sumatra. Okay. Well, frankly speaking, it's not very different between Indonesian and Bahasa Minang, but there's a code switching or code mixing we can see. In the first post, Yunizar say happy birthday to one of our friends whose birthday party today. But the response is, but the next speaker using Bahasa Minang, Minangkabau language. Bara Harago yang pink. There's a Minang language, Prof. So in this case, there's a different code they use, okay? And even the sticker here to show the response of the previous postings. So if we refer to the question, your question, so we can see that dominantly we use Indonesian language, because even though this is a kind of what you call it, alumni groups. Is it alumni or alumni? Alumni group from English department. So most of us are Minangkabau's background, Minangkabau people. But during this group, we only use Indonesian language, not Minangkabau, even though we have...
Are there any English words here? Like
Sorry?
model? Are there any English words here? Like model?
No. Model, no. Oh, yes, okay, here, only one.
155 RB per PT, what does that mean?
This one? This is a price. The
Per?
price, and this the
Ribu.
What's the word after ribu?
It's a price, the price of the clothes.
What's PER?
155,000 per pieces.
Right, so that's English, right? Per.
Yes, yeah, per pieces.
For every. That's what it means. You have English words in there as well. You probably didn't know.
The price is 155,000 per pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, and okay, yeah, these are English, simple ones. Makasih info is what you call it, apa singkatan, Mbak? The abbreviations of thank you. We say terima kasih.
I noticed in Indonesia you do have a lot of abbreviations for everything.
Yes. So instead of saying terima kasih, makasih, the speaker said MKS, makasih, infonya, okay? And then they mix again with using even this Jakarta style. Harganya.
Betawi like.
Yeah. So there's several code we can find here. Now,
I mean, there's how you understand impression management is about asking things like, what did you want to relay, but also would you use the same style of writing and typing and vocabulary with your family? Your
yes,
family members.
Sometimes we use it because these are common types of writing we use in WA in Indonesian context. But of course, it's different from other part of Indonesia. Maybe since I'm a West Sumatra people, we use Minangkabau language, but not for Javanese or Sundanese. They also mix with this code. So I think regarding to the impression for number one, yes, impression management taking place because each of the members want to show their identity here. For example, those who are in Jakarta dominantly use Jakarta, what you call it, Jakarta style speaking, and Minangkabau use Minangkabau speaking. So in other words, implicitly or unintentionally, they want to show their identities here. So we can understand that where they're from here. And for number three, what multilingual must take into consideration? Well, I think, I don't know about their consideration, but when I post my own comment here, I just make sure that I feel happy and my audience can understand it. So again, I think the expressiveness is my consideration in order to let my friends understand what I'm going to say or I feel during the chat. For number 3, the benefit of using this classroom, I think if we use in English, we can use it for learning English because we can see the context and then the participants can try to find out what the meaning of the word based on the context given. I think I can find the other multilingual platform like Twitter, Facebook, and other platform. Meanwhile, I myself joined the platform of Kadrama fandom rooms. That's all, Prof.
Okay.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, go.
Yeah. Can we use this as the data for the research in linguistic aspect, not language learning?
Well, yeah, if you've gone through the relevant processes, if that's part of your research question, yes.
Because well, in language learning we use English and Indonesian language, right? But this is the what you call it, our dialect ones. So we can use this as data, right?
Well, it depends what your research is.
I know. Yeah. It depends on research question. Okay, thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Thank you, Mbak Dina.
You're welcome, Budian.
Right. Where are we? Let me just...
In translingual.
Okay, am I back on the slide? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So, well, there are many things going on when we engage in these kinds of activities. There are multiple considerations that when we use multiple codes in online chats, and we've discussed some of them now. With regards to the language classroom, if you are involved in language teaching, there are several benefits to using this kind of thing. You can develop metalinguistic awareness through using these kinds of chats, through having these kinds of discussions about how we choose one language over another and why, and reflecting on these discussions, on these choices through discussion is a very good way of developing metalinguistic awareness. So they do have a place in the language classroom. You are hopefully more aware of this now that we have discussed it. Well, your students would obviously be more aware if you discussed it with them. Platforms that are multilingual. Well, there are lots. I mean, it's good to. I mean, I use WeChat, which is a Chinese social media account platform, and it automatically translates from whichever language you're using a third-party translator. So I can text people and check what they've said, and they text me back in Chinese, and it translates if I don't understand it, and so on. You can't do that with Facebook Messenger. You can't do it with Twitter Messenger. You have to translate it separately. Facebook does translate the posts and the comments, but it doesn't translate the messages as they come, and neither does iMessage or WhatsApp. WhatsApp doesn't do that either. So there are different kinds of multilingual functionalities embedded into different platforms now. Although people don't use language, in one go. They don't use one language and then another language. So the apps think that they do. So if you write a message which has multiple languages in it, how is your app going to translate it? It's going to get confused. So the Cantonese example we looked at earlier was 5 different codes in there, at least. So how would your translation app deal with that? It wouldn't. It can't. Because the translation app is built around an ideology that language is separate. Human beings are translingual. So even then, multilingual apps don't actually work. You have to take every chat, speak piece by piece, and understand it individually. So translanguaging online, the network society, the concept of the network society is extremely important. Translanguaging online is one manifestation of the network society. You know, and so how people, the network society has drastically transformed how we communicate and how communities manifest their linguistic identities across time and space. So translanguaging is therefore a phenomenon that is hard to pin down, always in flux, and grounded in the digital communication practices of people. Therefore, examining individual social practice is the best way to see it happen and to record it. Moving on to translation, as I just talked about a second ago. Among the most popular globalized online platforms is Wikipedia, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And it markets itself as multilingual. And from its about pages, it describes itself as a multilingual, web-based, free content encyclopedia. Note the order of the adjectives: multilingual, web-based, and free. I mean, Wikipedia has around 300 languages now. Over 100 of its language editions contain over 10,000 articles. Many of the entries are independent articles available in certain languages only, which suggests that the articles are not simple translations of content from one page to another. And this is really interesting because if something is going to be multilingual, then it has to be equal, or it should try to be equal. But it's if they're individual articles and then they're not, then there's a chance that they won't be. So what I want you to do now is, over the next 5-10 minutes, is to look up an entry in Wikipedia. You could look up multilingualism if you like, or look up anything like democracy, or look up something like football. I don't know. Look up anything in Wikipedia, okay? And then look up the English one, right? And then look up another one. Look up the same entry in another language, or which you know, like Indonesian or something, or I don't know, any other language. Okay, and then examine the difference in the way that it's written, the amount of information, and the scope of the coverage. Okay, can you do that now? Breakout rooms, just do it here. I don't want it. So do you know what to do?
Okay.
Sorry, my video's gone off.
Yeah.
Right, so do you know what to do?
Yes.
Okay, right. So
Yes.
look up something in Wikipedia. You could look up multilingualism. You could look up
I will do it.
democracy, something, or football, anything you like.
Mhm.
And then look it up in another language and compare the difference, if there is a difference. And then put your hand up, and then the moderator will allow you to explain what you have seen. Okay. Anybody? Did you find anything?
All right.
Dina, what did you look up?
Multilingualism. And
So anybody wants to tell us?
Okay.
What you looked up?
I go to Wikipedia and then type multilingualism and then several lists coming up. And then, for example, like some are in Indonesians and some are in, I don't know what language is it, unique in English. And some are, I don't know, Ludovic Orban is, I guess it's not English, right? And then Maros, I don't know. That's the list I got from when I typed the word multilingualism in Wikipedia, which use Indonesians, not English.
So did you look up multilingualism in English and then look up the same entry in
Okay, yeah.
Indonesian?
Okay, I
The
will
Indonesian
wait.
entry. So what was the difference between the two? Like was one article longer than the other article? Did one have more examples and more pictures and more explanation than the other one?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah. I guess when I look up the entry of multilingualism in English Wikipedia, I see more explanation.
Yeah,
About
correct.
what multilingualism is. There are so many entries.
Yeah.
More entries than what I found in
Indonesian, right?
Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps it's because of the contributors limitation or what I know.
Yet multilingualism is more common in Indonesia than it is in English context. Okay. Did you try with any other entry, any other topic anybody looked up?
Okay, wait.
Yeah, I've tried to look up the term literacy. Yeah, in Wikipedia Indonesia, I only found some, and no definition of literacy. Only some was it? Some lines, quotes about works on literacy, but I couldn't find one defining what literacy is. But when I see the Wikipedia in English, there are history of literacy and then the impacts of it on economics, on health, on many others. Even it's provide very clearly the chart, the trends of how the word literacy has halved between 1970 to 2015. So it's so comprehensive here in English Wikipedia.
So what does that tell you?
Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps well, the Indonesian is not yet familiar with this term, and not many people are searching this term for the.
Or what you wrote in your article, the concept of ignorance, which means that sometimes people do not aware of the benefits and many things deals with the technology. Probably that's what happens in Indonesia. If I'm not mistaken, if we are active in providing informations in Wikipedia, we can also earn money, if I'm not mistaken. But probably Indonesians are not aware of that. So when I also searched the term affinity spaces in English, the information is very complete, very good. Yeah, but when I try in Indonesia, there is nothing.
What this could tell us is that multilingualism is always ideological and about power.
Oh yeah, correct.
So the translanguaging framework for many people is important because it does not separate languages, because when you start to do that, whether you like it or not, whether you admit it or not, when you separate languages from other languages, you are bringing power into this, and ideology and hierarchy. But translanguaging flattens all that and says people, when they are interacting individually, there's a repertoire practice rather than a separation of languages, a repertoire-based practice. And although ideology still exists, and you can extrapolate what the ideology is in translanguaging, in a translanguaging heuristic, multilingualism ultimately is about separating languages out. And when you do that, it's not equal. So Wikipedia will say it's multilingual, but really it's not equal. Okay, and we would be wrong if we didn't highlight that. So that I just want to end on that, on this section on that point, that translanguaging plays a critical role in language practice and learning. People draw from multiple linguistic resources, and raw interaction is the best, data for translanguaging. And language is always ideological. We saw that just with a very simple activity of looking up something in Wikipedia in 2 languages and seeing the huge disparity between the 2. So the claim of multilingualism is that it's just all equal, all languages are that. No, it's not. It's a claim which hides behind the power differentiation of languages. Okay, so next one, communities online. Tell me very quickly in the chat, which communities online are you part of, and how have these helped your learning? Write in the chat. For 100 people in here, nobody writes in the chat. Nobody asks any questions. Come on. Right. My Indonesian students are always talking when I speak, when I teach them face to face. When I teach them online, they're very quiet. Okay, so how have these helped in your learning? Yeah, but YouTube is a platform. It's not a community. Are you part of any community online? Like I'm part of, I was, when I was a PhD student, part of several Facebook groups which discussed theory and philosophy, and that helped me. Well, Skype is a platform, it's not a community. What's HISKI?
What is it? What is HISKI, Ibu Eri? What is HISKI?
Online writing community, interesting. Telegram, again, it's a platform, it's not a community. Maybe it has a group within it, and you're part of that. And so how have these helped in your learning? They don't have to be educational. They can be, I don't know, they can be any group, sort of like a hiking group, I don't know, something like that, I mean, it could be anything that you're part of, even just a K-pop. Here we go, something interesting there. Korean Drama Fans Forum. Interesting. Do you translate the subtitles and things? Do you translate for that?
No.
Because I know many people who are part of these Korean and Japanese.
I don't translate it because they use daily conversation. It's quite different if we post in academic forum.
So Bu Dianrinita, so you use Indonesians in communicating with the members of the, no,
I'm using English.
English.
Yes.
So it's international.
Yep, international drama fan forum. However, sometimes you can see a different language as well in that forum. When people say by using Thailand, Philippines, any language you can find in that forum.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So from groups and communities to spaces, okay, right? So an affinity space is any place or set of places where people can affiliate with others based on shared passion or activity, not goals, not shared race or class or culture or gender. Affinity spaces are social locations, networks, or communities where groups of people are drawn together because of a shared, strong interest and engagement in a common activity. Affinity spaces can foster situated learning, okay? When skills or knowledge are transferred through mutually shared actions and goals. Focusing on learning which is not hierarchical. So there's not like a teacher and you are like this is hierarchical learning, okay? Affinity spaces are not like this. You could be the teacher in the affinity space. I could be the learner and you could be the teacher. It depends on what your passion is. It could be batik, or it could be K-pop, or it could be religious activity that you are discussing and debating, or it could be a World of Warcraft and these games, these online games like Minecraft. And it could literally be anything, okay? And that's why learning is situated. It is also embodied, okay? Jim G argues that humans understand content, whether it's a physical text or online text, when it is embodied, when they can relate that learning to something else and talk and dialogue around it. They also learn when learning is a cultural process. That's why I get you to discuss and have a discussion, as much as you may not like it. It is actually the best way for you to learn, rather than me telling you. How many people learn from being told? Maybe some people, but people learn from being told and then talking about what they've been told and then listening to somebody else talking about it and then being, that's usually a better way. Whether it's cooking, hunting, your religious practices, or whatever, okay? People learn through action and talking and dialogue and doing, rather than just memorizing, okay? So when students go out of the classroom to develop and join with people in their social interactions and social networks, we see affinity spaces emerging, and much of these are related to the acquisition of new identities through engagements in social practices in the affinity space. So when you are in an affinity space, think about what is the common passion or cause that keeps you together. What are the unique and common social practices which tie the members together? What are the language practices going on here? And how is learning, or language learning, if this is what you're interested in, how is it being carried out in the affinity space? Okay. I know people who, for example, they have been part of K-pop groups where they've done translations of songs and subtitles, and they have developed immensely in their language learning through this kind of fun interaction outside of the classroom. People who are interested in religious study, they will study texts through groups that they are part of, and they'll become very proficient. I mean, I studied classical Arabic through study of religious, texts, and purely, outside of the realm of language learning, formal language learning. People are interested in things like whatever. I mean, the list is endless, actually. What you can draw from. So Jim G argues that he uses the metaphor of space rather than community, in contrast to Levin Wenger's communities of practice concept. He uses the concept of space. And the distinction is important in understanding the nature of the environment that you're in and what can happen within the environment. So you've got this like free exchange of ideas in an affinity space. Okay, you've got this free exchange of ideas, and it's not fixed, and interactions are not hierarchical. Sometimes they can be hierarchical, but that's not really based on. It's based on to what extent you are involved in the passion of that topic, of that field, of that area of interest. It's not. Passion brings people to affinity spaces, and this is important because it's beyond interest. It's not about intelligence. It's really about the collective intelligence. Okay. So beginners and professionals can all participate together. And so there's like 10 characteristics of an affinity space. The common endeavor, the newbies and masters mastering, internal grammar, okay, is transformed by external grammar. So you've got like an external grammar. You've got like rules within the affinity space, okay, rather than general rules of language. And there's extensive knowledge, intensive and extensive knowledge, and it's distributed and dispersed, and so on. And there are many routes to status in the affinity space. There's not one way of learning and developing. So a key question to ask so they're virtual spaces where people interact, different to online. There are a range of online spaces that you can be part of, websites, social networking sites, fan fiction sites, knowledge building sites, professions, workplaces, etc. And many of you have listed things there. The participants come from very diverse backgrounds, and they can be multiple backgrounds linguistically, in terms of geographically, professional affiliations, and people will participate in the affinity space to varying degrees. Some people will be heavily involved, some people will just hang around and just take in information, and some people will change how they interact. And so the important thing to realize is that learning is situated, it is embodied, and it is a cultural process. Learning is through participation, and it is examining what goes on in an affinity space is an ecological approach to language practice and learning. So I asked you to, in the Google.
Yeah, excuse me, Dr. Ibrat, can I just ask questions before coming to the next activity about the affinity spaces? Yeah. As you just said, that affinity spaces are group or communities where people are drawn together because of their shared interests. So what if, let's say, I want to conduct a research that I create a community on purpose. Can we say it as an affinity spaces, or no? Because it is not.
What do you mean on purpose? I don't understand. As opposed to by accident.
I mean, when we create a group, a community, not because of they are actually shared the same interest, but they have to join for certain purpose, let's say for research or other, then can we just say it as an affinity spaces, or it has to be something coming or drawn based on their shared interests without any
Usually for an affinity space, it's self-interest. If people are being forced into it, it doesn't work. You can research it, you can look into it, but it is best because if you're forcing people, then some of them don't want to be there. Passion drives the affinity space.
Yeah, but so we couldn't create. Yeah, we couldn't create the community ourselves then. So
well, this example, where does this example come from?
Now, let's say, yeah, I want to know, for example, how how gamers, let's say, how gamers then improve their language ability by doing online communities. But then I create my own communities for the sake of my research, rather than I took one community that have already exists.
Yeah, but why did you need to create one?
Yeah, but because I need to what is it to adjust, to choose, to select the participants. Let's say suits to my research objectives.
But your research is about affinity groups, right?
Yes.
So join a group that already exists.
Already.
If I want to do research in schools, I'm not going to build my own school.
Yeah.
There are many of the schools to make my own classroom and research it. It's a very difficult job. I mean, I wouldn't do it correctly anyway, right? So, what if you're going to look at how people join groups, and you should really choose one that exists and is functioning.
Yeah, I see. So yeah, choose one that exists. Yes. Thank
Why
you.
make more work for yourself? Because then you'll have to create content for this group, and then because you're too busy researching it, it's a contrived, we call it a contrived situation. It's not real.
Yeah, I see.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
If you created a group for your course as a teacher, that is different because people want to do the course. That's why they join your course, right? So maybe that passion will transfer into the group that you set up. But really, even for a course, you should not set up a group as a teacher. That's not really you can have an affinity, you can call it an affinity space, but really the group that they set up outside of the college or the university for the course, that's the real affinity space where they can talk freely about you and the teacher without anybody checking. That's the real affinity space. Not the one that you set up or I set up, the other one. But then we use that one. We tell the student, can you promote this in that group, this link? Tell the others through the informal like group. Then somebody will say, oh, the student said this. And I will say, what are you talking about? And they will say, they said it in the other group, the private one. And I said, well, can you tell them this in that group? So then it becomes silly, right? But ultimately, the passion-driven one, which is not hierarchical, is the real affinity space, not the one I invented. I could pretend to be a student and go into the other one. But then they will say, who is this guy who never comes to the class? Okay.
Can we say a blog can create affinity space, Prof?
Affinity what? What? Say that again.
A blog. Suppose that we create a blog and then we let people to have, we have discussion about the content of the blog. Can we say that it's a kind of affinity space?
Yeah, you could if it fits the criteria, if it's open and if it's people can participate
and having conversation there. So we can say a blog. My blog is one of the affinity space then.
It depends what they're doing. Are they just commenting on who's posting the blog? Whose blog is it?
My blog. Suppose that I have.
Then you are in charge of it. It's not hierarchical. Make it everybody's blog.
Yes. Oh, okay. No, I mean, I create a blog and then I let people give a comment on the blog. Then they discuss about.
They're giving a comment, but they're not writing for the blog. So their contribution is limited. Again, it's hierarchical. The real affinity space is their own platform, which they can develop. Are you talking about a course?
Course.
Are you talking about a course?
No.
Okay, just a blog.
No, yeah, just a blog. For example, I provide the content about how to write something, how to cook something, and then they give a comment about what I have written, and then the other person give a comment again, so they create a thread based on my blog.
Maybe it could be. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the hierarchical aspect, which is.
Okay. No.
Yeah. So affinity spaces, we can examine the discourse within affinity spaces, and we can look at. We can use certain methodologies to help us do this. And so I sent you I gave you one of the readings, was an extract, I think, of.
Thank you.
Of Rodney Jones and Christoph Hafner's book, which I liked. And so the culture of an affinity space. How do you examine the culture of an affinity space? Well, there's 4 types of analytic lenses that you can draw. You can look through. You can to examine the discourse of affinity spaces. We can examine the ideology. That is to say, what people think in the affinity space. what is valued, what is devalued, what are commonly held beliefs. Okay, if you get thrown out of a Facebook group, you violated one of the rules. Okay, because there is an ideology within it. That group, every group has an ideology, whether they say it or whether they don't say it. It's an ideology. There is an ideology, a set of ideas associated, a set of norms which are valorized and valued and commonly held. And examining that is important. The face system, how people get along, whether or not relationships are hierarchical or egalitarian. Okay, the system of, I mean, do people use titles when they talk to people, doctor, professor, or do they not? That's part of the face system. Is there hierarchical, forms of address? Do people, is knowledge coming from certain people who are in positions of dominance within the affinity space? So the face system is in relation to that. Have you ever heard of the expression saving face in English? Saving face. Don't don't embarrass me. You know, I'm trying to save face. I'm trying to save my face. It's very common in Asia, actually. Saving face. My ancestry is Asian, and it still creeps into our practice even after so many decades of being in the UK. Don't embarrass me. I got to do this because I got to get them something because they got me something, and now I got all this stuff. Like, don't embarrass me. When you're at somebody's house, there's a protocol of behavior. With your husband or wife, and you don't want to get embarrassed, and so there's always this saving face. And so there's a face system in interaction. Okay. I went to visit a Pakistani friend recently, and he's about 23. Okay, so he's 20 years younger than me, and his mum, I didn't know what generation she was with, so I didn't know, and I spoke in Punjabi, which is one of my heritage languages, and I didn't know which pronoun to use because she could be my age, and there are 3 pronouns for 3 different levels of hierarchy, and I used the wrong one. I think she got a little bit offended, and I then switched, and then I thought, what an embarrassment, because I was confused because he's my friend and that's his mum. And so normally my friend's mum, I would call her auntie in the traditional Indian Pakistani community, which is in Britain at the moment and has been here for a long time. Right? We still use our face system of our ancestors, even in English, we still use it. Even though we're native speakers of English, but we still use a face system when speaking to the community. And I accidentally slipped up there with that situation. I can't call her auntie because she's probably my age or around about my age. And so I actually use the wrong pronoun. So the face system is really important for some people in the world. So then we have forms of discourse, how people communicate, what they think the underlying purpose of communication is, the functionality of the tools, the technologies, okay, what they allow you to do, what the workarounds, so you have, this can be a slightly more technological perspective on the discourse, the languages, the genres, the styles they use for communication, okay? And then you have socialization, how people in the affinity space learn to participate, how much of this learning is formal, how much of it is informal, what about those people who don't participate, are there any consequences, or how do people develop and progress in the affinity space to become the experts, quote unquote? Okay, so we can look at affinity spaces through these 4 steps, okay, of discourse analysis, which I think are quite useful here. So what I want you to do now over the next 5 to 10 minutes, possible, is to find any social networking site that you know. Okay. It can be in Indonesia, it can be in English, and then I want you to examine how its online culture. What is its online culture? And so think about its ideology. What people think, what is valued, what is devalued, what are the commonly held beliefs. Face system, how people get along, whether or not relationships tend to be egalitarian or hierarchical, are there forms of address, etc. Forms of discourse, the functionality of the technology, how interactions occur, genres, styles, etc. Socialization, how people learn to participate, how people develop and progress within the affinity space. Can you do that now? Have a quick think. You don't have to do a very deep analysis, okay? I just want to get you thinking about this. Or, excuse me, or we can leave it and we can come back to it, okay? But at least you have it there if you want to do it, all right? So let's move on. Actually, let's move on. So affinity spaces enable language learners to participate in diverse ways, reinforce knowledge, and there are many, many kinds of affinity spaces. Do you know of any in language learning or in learning, like any communities? You mentioned a writing group, Dina. You want to say more about that?
Yeah, it's a group where we can share everything, actually. Yeah, not only our writing, but we also shares about any informations related with a forum of writing, competitions of writing, and then workshop of writing, and also, yeah, sharing kinds of motivation quotes like that.
Right, so how to research affinity space, right? It's better to take an ecological approach. It's better to focus on not just the technology, but the social practices, as I highlighted in the first lesson, and about how the culture develops in the affinity space. And the discourse system approach is another one. This can be part of that as well. Affinity spaces are very closely connected to identity. An important point about identity is that it is fluid and multifaceted. In any given context of social interaction, there may be one or more aspects of our identity emerging as we choose to reveal and express a part of ourselves, or choose to hide or sort of be private about that particular aspect of ourselves. While some aspects of identity tend to be static, like gender and things like that, and nationality, some may be open to development, like your occupation, etc., like your hobbies and interests and social networks. The plural form identities, therefore, tends to get used, and such changes emerge in our interactions online. And whomsoever is at the other end of those interactions. Identities are sometimes like masks that can be worn or taken off in social interaction. And Irving Goffman refers to the metaphor of performance to help understand this. We have accomplished performances of identity according to who we are talking to. We make use of various kinds of equipment. We have a stage, we have curtains which open, and then we start the acting and the performance. And then we go backstage to wear our rough clothes, take off our makeup, and behave as we want to behave. Right, and then we have the performance. Have you ever watched a film where there's a scene in a film? Have you seen that kind of scene where somebody's rehearsing in front of the mirror what they're going to say about something really important, and they're like in the bathroom mirror with the vest on, and practicing what they're going to say. That's actually a very explicit, confirmation of the backstage. And we all have backstage. That's where we really live, you know. I was thinking about what I'm going to say here actually earlier in the kitchen. So that was my backstage, you know. I was wearing a vest, but now I'm wearing a shirt on the front stage, you know. And so we all have a backstage and front stage, and we all do it. So government uses the theatrical metaphor, you know, in that way, including costume and settings and things like that. All of these things have implications and manifestations in online environments, particularly social media. Examining digital literacy tells us something about these practices. I mentioned in the last lesson about the glass bedroom. That's another metaphor people invoke. The glass bedroom, as I said, would you like to have one? Probably not, because most things you do in the bedroom are private. Well, some people, their online life is like a glass bedroom. And so there's also an element of curating the self, how we block and unfollow people who say things we don't like, and we create bubbles of agreeability in which we live and consume information, most of which agrees with us. Therefore, we don't really face or have to face challenging or disagreeable information. You know, and that's a very important social skill and emotional skill, to face disagreement. It's necessary, actually, to face views that are contrary to yours and to deal with them and to even consider them if they are more rational and based on, you know, evidence. So a social practice approach to digital literacy that as I have tried to outline over the last 4 hours, is really important for uncovering these kinds of practices in our lives. There is just so much to look at. It is so rich. It's unbelievable. So one way of looking at identity is how the interface between the global and the local. We have seen this already with our translanguaging. This is global practice, okay? Where we don't establish, we don't abide by global and local norms, but we create our own local norms by enmeshing them together. Think about how you yourself display local and global features about yourself online, how these features and these practices relate to who is the target audience of your posts and your messages and your online behavior. For example, in what languages do you post online? And which posts are in which language? What about which platform you use and whom you target in each different platform? What about your user profile name? Is it an English name or a name in another language? Or is it another script? Is it a combination of characters from 2 languages or several languages? Or is it a combination of emojis and multiple languages? So the tension between local and global is often expressed through our digital literacy practices, and are best discovered through an exploration of social practices. So it's very interesting to look at that, how we are expressing ourselves globally and locally. Can you please write in the chat, 1 minute, how you are expressing yourself globally, locally? Go. I want 85 answers in 1 minute. Let's completely overload this chat box. I will tell you how I'm expressing myself globally and locally. Hold on. Well, you go. Everybody has to write something. How you are expressing yourself globally. But okay, and Sundanese, okay. And what about do you use different things, different characters, different usernames? Do you use different platforms? Yeah, I put my answer in there. Come on, everybody, put your answers in. That's how I'm expressing myself globally and locally. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Okay, anyone else? I'll look out for you. Okay, any other responses? Or you're being shy again? I've never seen it. Usually my Indonesian students, I cannot get them to stop talking, right? Physically, when I have to say stop. But for some reason today, online, it's not happening.
For today, it seems like 5 participant forums, yeah. Only Budian Rianita, moderator Rindu, and I, and Dr. Ibrar, who participated. Yeah, Dr. Ibrar, I also want to know the symbols that you use.
What?
I don't know, what is that a name or something?
Yeah, it's a name.
Name.
Yeah, so
Ibrar in Cantonese.
I took my name, right? Okay.
Mm.
And the Chinese character, the Chinese is a character system, so it's not phonetic. So you can't get letters and match them to letters in your language. Okay, you have to find characters which pre-exist, right? So you've got to match your word name to the current millions of characters that exist out there. So the surname comes first, so it's Ba, which is actually a Chinese surname, right? And then Ibor means is closer to Ibra, it's close to Ibra, and it means, it has a meaning basically. So yeah. So it links to the meaning of my Arabic first name and Sanskrit surname, and yeah, that's right, yeah, Ba Ibor, and it has a meaning that I like. It's connected to my original name. If you move from one language to the next, even a phonetic language, it's easy. You just find the letter, don't you? Like alif, ba, ra, alif, bra, bra. Right? It's easy, right? A, B, R, A, R, I, B, R, A, R. It's easy when you move phonetically. But when you move to a character language, you're not moving phonetically. You've got to find a character. So Ibor means like with a lot of knowledge. So I like that name. So yeah, I took it. Yeah, so that's how I express myself globally and locally. And different people will have different practices in their life. You see, very good. You use Hindi. Oh, you speak Hindi. You speak Hindi, Rindu.
Well, not really, but I love Hindi because I love Bollywood movies and songs.
Yeah, I speak some Hindi. I grew up speaking Urdu, which is orally the same as Hindi.
Yeah.
So I grew up with all of those
That's
films.
right.
My mom taught me to read it as a child, not Hindi, but Urdu.
Oh,
But I learned my languages from birth. Yeah, although I've kind of forgotten it now.
that's right. There are many languages in India, and I think I can only choose Hindi or Urdu to speak it. Like Tamil, Malayalam, and other languages. And my friend said that you cannot say that Hindi is the national language of India because there are too many languages there.
It's the lingua franca for the most of South Asia, Hindustani. They refer to it as Hindustani. So that will be Urdu, Hindi, and Bangladeshi people. Many of them will speak Urdu as well, not all of them. And but yeah, you're right. You go down to the south, Tamil. You also go to areas of Pakistan. They won't speak Urdu. They'll speak Punjabi and Pashto and things like that.
Definitely, that's it.
Urdu was somewhat imposed on Pakistan,
I think
Okay.
Urdu is more likely like Arabic, but because
actually they're mutually intelligible. Hindi and Urdu are mutually intelligible. There are mutually intelligible, so people can understand each other. That's how I grew up watching Hindi films, even though I'm not speaking Hindi. Actually, my parents. So Hindi is Urdu, almost identical to Urdu orally. Okay. Remember that the word Hindi is actually an Arabic word. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Urdu was the language of India. Anyway, are you on Twitter? There's a guy called Rizwan Ahmed who writes about this a lot. He's very good. Yeah.
I think we have more time to speak. Like, we need more knowledge from Dr. Ibrar. 2 hours, not enough.
Yeah. Well, I'm inshallah they will call me back. I mean, I will be doing some work with you, but it will be for academics who are trying to get published. Tirtayasa.
I guess, sorry for interrupting. Yeah, sorry for interrupting. I really need to remind the moderator. It's 5:12 already. It's a very interesting discussion. Yeah, actually, it's just like a discussion between 5 of us. Yeah. But sorry, we are running out of time. Yeah, probably we can continue it later. Yeah.
It's like a private class.
Yeah, it's private class with Dr. Ibrar. So it's a privilege and we are honored.
Thank you very much, Tirtayasa.
Yeah, I myself is still enjoying the discussion with Dr. Ibrar.
Yeah, really.
And but as Rindu said, that 120 minutes or 2 hours won't be enough to discuss everything here, and so that I guess we have to get another session later, another lecture with our distinguished tutor today. And time that's very fast. We got to leave, and thank you so much for Dr. Ibrar. And also for the
so if you are interested in doing any research on this and you have some ability to do that research, then let me know and we can maybe book something.
We will, Rosma and I and Budi and Rianita, probably we can join, we make a group and consult with Dr. Ibrar about our research, our future research dealing with digital literacy, collaborations, okay?
Well, Indonesia would be great context for this, actually.
Okay, it's very good.
In the different communities and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, actually, for the offer, the offer for us.
Thank you very much.
So we have to grab the opportunity as soon as possible, Budi and Rianita, Okay,
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. So thank you so much once more, Dr. Ibrar, and also Ibu Dian, and also Ibu Rindu for engaging very actively in the discussion. And see you in another series of our short course, series 4 and 5. And please join another upcoming programs of International Office Untirta. Thank you very much. See you around. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.